Brother Joe, welcome to the Suits and Sneakers stage. I believe this is your first ever occasion being here. Is that true?
First time on stage here, yeah.
Give him another round of applause for that. Joe, you and I met through a variety of circumstances, but it was about last year, and I've obviously been following your journey ever since. Toward the end of the year, you became a Suits and Sneakers member, and we've been getting to know a little bit about each other's lives. And you partially came to me with some of your story, but then I picked it up through articles, through podcasts and the works, and I thought this evening and this event would be worthwhile for people. And I want to set a bit of a precedent, if I may, just before we get going, is that we are not trying to give you some kind of autobiography for the next hour and a bit. I think that would be a missed opportunity. I sat down with Joe many a times before this event, and we focused on these 5 core pillars that we want to talk through tonight. If the audience is the most valued part of tonight, then the goal is that you walk away with a real learning curve, not just a cool story. And so in no particular order, I think that there are these 5 pillars that speak to identity, perspective. They speak to mental health. They speak to radical accountability. And last but not least, they speak to what real healing looks like. And so what you're going to see throughout this evening, certainly from my end, the way I've tried to structure the interview is not just to ask Joe to read out his autobiography, but for us to really delve deeply into these 5 pillars. And I'm setting that as a context to each and every one of you. That's it from me. Joe, do you have a little bit of an opener and a welcome and anything you'd like to say before we get going?
Just in general, thank you so much to everyone who came out here tonight, those who are watching the live stream as well. Very grateful that you made time out of your day to come out here and hear me talk, and it's great to actually have the mic for this next little hour a little bit, so thank you, everyone. Oh, and hey, Mom and Dad, if you're watching.
Joe, I want to kick off a little bit about this first pillar, if you will, and I want to speak to the idea of identity. Specifically, in life, whether we realize it or not, we wake up one day as an adult and we've inherited identities that we didn't actually go for ourselves. Every one of you here today, none of you really picked your names, your ethnicity, your culture, or any of those things. So we inherit these identities. You're no different. And what was striking to me when I initially met you, and I'm sure you get it a lot, you're this tall, lanky American, big beard, tattoos, and so that comes with a certain association that people have. Oh, that's Joe, he looks a certain way. That must mean that he is insert story here about Joe. As I've seen, those identities don't always serve us. I would love for you to give the audience a little bit of a background and an introduction. By weight of your accent, you're clearly not from South Africa. So where are you from? What is this identity that you were given? And just tell us a little bit about the early days of Joe and how you land up here.
Yeah, so I'm obviously not South African. I'm originally from the States. I have lived here in South Africa now for, I think this year is going to be 13 years. And I think where I usually start my story was that I started college in 2001. On the second year of college, I signed up for the National Guard. I wanted some discipline in my life, so I wanted to join the United States Army. And after my second year of college, I had, in between my sophomore and junior year of college, I went and did my basic and infantry training. So this was with the U.S. Army. And even though I did my basic and infantry training, I was supposed to start college back the next semester, but this was during 2004, which was the height of the war. So the Iraq conflict was going off. And instead of being able to start school, I got a phone call 2 days after being on campus that, hey, this is your platoon sergeant. You need to be here next week, and you're going to be gone for a year. So that was the phone call that I got that completely flipped my life upside down. And I went to train up in the States for 7 months. I was 20 years old at the time. And then I spent 10 months over 10 months in Iraq doing infantry And, I think being a young kid that was very, I'd say brainwashed, like coming out of the military, you get quite brainwashed being in basic training. But it gives you a lot of tools. Like I had a lot of respect for other people. I started to have a lot more grit, learn how to wake up at 4 a.m. But that training that I had took me into Iraq, and I was around guys who were much older than me. So at the age of 20, I felt that I became quite matured. And luckily, when I was in Iraq, I didn't see a lot of conflict. But that time kind of helped me become the man who I am now. And I think it kind of helped shaped my future and who I became now. And so after Iraq, I went back to college, finished my degree, and I got a job with a defense contractor in the United States. I worked for them for 5 years, and then that's when the ties of South Africa started to pull me in this direction. I was connected with someone on Instagram 13, 14 years ago as a woman, and I started a relationship on Instagram, and that eventually got me here to come visit South Africa for the first time. And I was hooked. I went back to the U.S., sold all my stuff, quit my job, packed up my bags, and moved here to South Africa. And that was now 13 years ago. Thanks. And I haven't looked back since. Like, I get a lot of people ask me, Joe, would you ever go back to the States? And I immediately say no. For me, one of the biggest things that I love about South Africa, and I say this every time, is I feel like South Africa is lawless. We have so much freedom to do so many things that we want to do. And for me, the person that I am, I don't like to be put in a box. I don't like rules. My motto is don't be a dick, which was so appropriate for what you said for people coming into the clubhouse. So I believe South Africa for me is where I was always born to be and to end my days. If there is anyone here in immigration, please come see me afterwards. I do have some questions. So yeah, South Africa is definitely in my blood. And if you are here because you follow me on Instagram, you can see that I love this country with all my heart. And I think my Instagram page is basically like my love letter to South Africa. I think that's ultimately what it is.
I'm going to hold the identity pillar, which is something we're going to come back to and we're going to flow in. When we talk about perspective, I find that to be interesting that in South Africa, sometimes we need to hear from an American that you love the place. You know what I mean? Because we've gone through a really hard time in the last 12 or 13 years that you've been here as a South African nation. And we've had long patches of people wanting to leave the country. And then you've got this American who not only loves South Africa, moves here, wants to stay here, but you've gone and started this Instagram account, really. You've got this series. How many of you, by just as a matter of interest, don't know what I'm talking about? So here in South Africa, have you ever heard of it? Show of hands, you haven't? So, okay, well then there you go. You're an extra bonus. I mean, talk me through what makes you start this Instagram page. Why?
It's so it was a trip. I was in the States about a year and a half ago, and I was going to visit my family, and speaking to a lot of my friends and my family, I realized that Americans and my family and friends didn't know shit about the real South Africa. All they knew was what they saw on the news, saw on TV. It was all the negative things. And after that trip, I came back and just felt that I had an obligation to share my experiences of South Africa with my company. So I own a company called Bonafide Motoco, where I take people on motorcycle adventures. You can see my Triumph over here. And with that business, I've had the opportunity to travel all over Southern Africa, through India, Nepal, all these countries. And I've gotten to see so much beauty and good, meet so many amazing people here in South Africa. So I felt that coming back from this trip and hearing all the negativity and all the stereotypes, I just felt like I had an obligation to share on my Instagram. So one day I was taking my dog to the park, and I thought, I'm just going to go for it. So I pulled out my phone and I did my thing. And I don't know how it started. I don't think it started off as so here in South Africa. But I just said, Americans don't know shit about South Africa. And I want to help change that narrative and help educate people on what life is really like here in South Africa. And that started with that one video. The next day I went to the park. I did another video, and eventually I have a business partner at Bonafide Motorco who said, I think after a couple of weeks, he eventually caught on. He said, this whole so here in South Africa thing that you're doing, and that's when it really stuck with me. And I think, I don't have an agenda with the so here in South Africa. I have like a very short list of places that I want to go, food that I want to taste and experience. But ultimately, it's about showcasing all of South Africa. Like I'm starting a new series on Instagram called Ride, Eat, Repeat. And it's where I take the motorcycle. I go to different towns within Gauteng, and I go and test out different food places, and I meet people along the way. And this series will evolve into from Joburg or Pretoria. There's one place in Heidelberg that I'm going to. And then this will go out to Durban, the Western Cape, the Midlands. So really showing all that South Africa has to offer from the bike.
Everybody wants to know how you stay so thin, Joe.
It's my metabolism. I've been great. I've had the honor and the privilege of staying thin for many years. I did kind of pick up a dad bod towards the end of last year. Have started training again, which has been great. So I'm up at 4 a.m. every morning. I'm sorry to Tammy to keep you up, but I wake up at 4 in the morning, go to the gym. So I'm getting even thinner now. But I do have a good metabolism, so I can eat all the burgers I need to.
There was a moment when I read an article early on in our journey about you carrying a camera when you were in Iraq. Would you mind just sharing a little? Because I thought that was quite a cool anecdote, and it shows you how you throw these little darts at the dartboard early on in your life. You have no clue that they're going to somehow interconnect far later. So please just tell the audience what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, so as a kid, I was always fascinated with cameras. We had the disposable ones. My mom had an old 35 millimeter. And when I went to Iraq, I took this Sony CyberShot. It was like an instant camera, and it was like that big. And I just took it, and I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I documented my buddies and I in our barracks, out in town, on rides and on not trips, but missions. And eventually I got to a point where I felt safe in the town that we were in. And so on my vest, I had 3 magazine pouches. And one day I decided to take out 2 of those magazines and put my Sony CyberShot, which fitted perfectly into that pouch. And so no one knew that I had the camera in. And so eventually we started walking around town, and I just admired all the people that were in Iraq, the locals, the kids, the older guys, the beauty of the place. And eventually one day I just slung my rifle, got out my camera, and just started shooting photos. And I did this a couple times, and eventually my lieutenant saw me doing this, and he would be like, "Fleming, put that fucking camera away. Get your rifle out." And he would get pissed. He got so pissed at me, but it was something that was near and dear to my heart, that I felt safe where I was. And I wanted to document it. And so I have a lot of photos of my time in Iraq, but that was over 22 years ago. And now that kind of experience of shooting photos in Iraq kind of put me where I am now as a commercial photographer. It's something that I always have a camera in my hand, or I always have my phone and taking amazing photos for people and places. And it's just something that I've enjoyed since I was a little kid. And so to be able to, I think I spoke to you the other day about it, that I went to Iraq 22 years ago with a different set of eyes. And I've had this plan to go back on a motorcycle to Iraq with a different set of eyes as a mature adult who's not in a uniform, who can be a guest, a welcomed guest in that country. And so that's one of my goals over the next 10 years is to go back to Iraq, document it, and go around and actually get to experience the place outside of a uniform.
What is it that you think that South Africans, because you're coming here as an American, or you've been here for quite some time, you've got this Instagram page that you're trying to showcase the best of South Africa to the world. What do you think it is about South Africans and what we miss about South Africa? Maybe because you're kind of fishes in water, we don't realize we're in the water. So what is it that we're missing that you see? You mentioned lawless, but I think there's obviously, I've traveled and I've lived in other countries, so I agree with you. I didn't appreciate the rawness of South Africa and the freedom that we can do as we wish. But to me, what is it that South Africans are missing? I'd love to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on that, what we're not prospectively getting right about South Africa.
For me, it's the little things. It's the doily that South Africans kind of forget about as a young kid. But for me, I think where I would have to take that conversation is to my interest and desire for adventure. And what I think South Africans forget about is what's in their own backyard. So when it comes to holidays, a lot of times I know people go overseas to go to different places, but there's so much here on offer in South Africa, from the Wild Coast up to Sodwana to Sutherland to all these places. There's so much that South Africa offers that I think people forget about. And that's one of the things that I love doing, like on my travels. I've gone to places like the Free State. There's just so many random, beautiful, amazing spaces that are here in our own country that I think people kind of forget about. So that's one of the reasons that I love doing these here in South Africa videos while I travel, while I'm on the bike. You know, you get to see these small little places because I'm not a 5-star kind of guy. I love these small independent shops where it's just this little Tani that's out there baking pies and getting to know her story. And I think that is South Africa at its core, is these small pod stalls in different places that you can really find off the beaten path.
We have a travel, this is one of the things that drew me to you, is we have a travel channel that we haven't done much work on in the last year because I have a little daughter, but called Like a Tourist. And I think that sometimes South Africans almost only consider themselves to be traveling when they leave their borders. And we don't appreciate, I've got this phrase that I love, the soul of South Africa resides in its small towns. In other words, sometimes we forget that South Africa is not Joburg or Sandton or fucking Bryanston Drive. It's far deeper than that. Like also, South Africa is not Cape Town. And the more you spend time traveling through smaller towns around South Africa, you realize that that's actually much more of what South Africa is like. And that is when you start to realize, we have this joke, my wife and I, because she's South African, but she has a Swiss heritage, and we had our daughter in Switzerland so that she could get a Swiss passport. So we had to spend at least 3 months there. And we would walk past someone, and naturally our thing is to say hello to people in a park, or you get into a lift and you say hello. Well, what I learned in those 3 months is that when you say hello to a Swiss person, there's something wrong. They're like, what the fuck are you saying hello for? Like, what is going on? Is everything okay? Because now they feel it. But the craziest thing is when they used to greet back, we used to do like a whole celebration. We'd like, did you just see that? That Swiss person just said hello back. And when I got back to South Africa, I was like, wow, our people, our food, the gees, we have our problems for sure. Joe, I want to move along to, I guess, a core topic of tonight. When I use this phrase, mental health, it has so many alternative associations to it. But I really want to delve into this history. You come to South Africa for love. That doesn't quite work out at some point, but you stay, you build these businesses, and you've been very open. I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but you've been very open, especially in the last 2 years or so, about some of the difficulties that you've been through. So I'd like you to set the context of how you land up in the position you were a year ago. Just, kind of get us there, and then we can really delve into it.
Yeah, so kind of looking back through my time here in South Africa, becoming an older adult, there was a lot of issues that I had that I guess they were kind of bottled up that I didn't really know. It was undiagnosed. Like I was recently diagnosed as bipolar 2 manic. So I dealt with a lot of those symptoms on a day-to-day basis, but I had no idea like what it was that I was going through. My sort of symptoms that I had I would have these really high highs and then these really low lows, but I never had a baseline. Like I know one of my buddies here today, he had told me that a lot of times people would ask like, how is Joe doing? Is Joe good or is Joe bad? Because I never had this steady baseline of just living life. I was either riding high on some crazy idea that I had, or I was down in the dumps and I felt that I couldn't get out of those holes. And after my divorce, I also lost my dog. So it was about the same year that I went through a divorce and the loss of a dog she was like my service dog. And so she was everything to me. And during that divorce and losing my dog, I decided that I needed to go and feel this pain, that I didn't want to go numb my pain with alcohol and with drugs and with partying. I wanted to go and really feel all this pain. And so there was a farm that I go to out in Vicksburg where I spent a lot of time trying to heal myself and trying to get away and actually realize what I had done wrong in this divorce and actually taking ownership over the things that I did right and over the things that I did wrong. And I had a lot of guilt and shame leaving that divorce. And I realized that at the time I said, I wish that I would have done this. I wish that I would have done that. And ultimately I came to realize very quickly that there's no going back. I can't make those rights wrong. But what I can do is in the next relationship or the next engagement I have with someone else, that all those things that I did wrong, I'm going to do right. I'm going to learn those lessons the hard way, and I'm going to do the next right thing. And going into the next year, I was still struggling with some of those issues. My highs were getting much higher. My lows were getting much lower. And I got to a point where with my business, I was just withdrawing from friends, withdrawing from my business. I had lost confidence in myself, and I really got to a point where I had no idea what I was going to do to get myself out of this situation. And one day I was out at the farm and I had this idea that of how I could end my life. And I sat with that thought, and I contemplated suicide many times over the years, but I never had a solid plan. I'm not allowed to carry a weapon here or a handgun here. So I was like, well, that option's out. And this one night I come up with an idea that I learned about through it's always hard to say it, asphyxiation, that with gas, it will ultimately take the oxygen out of your lungs and you'll die and you can go peacefully. So I got this idea on a Tuesday night at the farm, packed up on my bags the next morning, and my plan was to drive to Joburg, go to the bottle store, and go sit in the car with 2 bottles of gas. And that's exactly what I did. I drove home for 4 hours that day from Vicksburg with one idea, one goal in mind, and there was a couple times on that drive where I felt, well, maybe if I choose this option of going to this event this weekend, this will get me off course of this plan. And I was like, you know what? It's not worth it for me. I just want out. So I went home that night, went to the bottle store, went down to the park, made a brandy and Coke, went home, made some more brandy and Cokes, and eventually went into my car. I put 2 Kodak bottles of propane in my truck, turned on the gas, and that was that. I fell asleep. I was in there for a couple hours, and at some point, somehow, miraculously, I ended up waking up. And when I woke up, I felt it was piss all on my pants, all in the chair. And what had happened was that my body was dying, and it was relieving my bladder, and all I could hear was this gas that was on. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? Not today. And I turned off the gas, opened up the car, let all the air out, and just kind of sat with myself for that moment. I think my roommates ended up coming out at some point, and I acted like I was on a phone call. And the next morning, there was a couple of phone calls that I had to make that morning. I told a friend of mine who's a doctor, I phoned him and I just said, Matt's like, dude, this is what I did last night, and, I really need some help. I'm quite worried about myself. I taste gas, I smell gas. And so he took me to the hospital to go get checked out. They ran my bloods, did an EKG, everything was fine. And the last person that I met with there was a counselor. And that counselor said, look, with the intent that you had of trying to kill yourself last night, I would really recommend that you go into a treatment center. And that was kind of my aha moment. So there's a movie with Denzel Washington called Flight. Who here has seen that movie, Flight? So for those who haven't seen that movie, Denzel Washington's an alcoholic. He's an amazing pilot, and he ends up crashing this plane, but actually saves a lot of people on this plane. But I think one or two people die. And at the very end of the movie, I'm not going to give anything away, but maybe I will, and it's fun. But at the end of the movie, he has an opportunity to put the blame onto someone else, the person who died, or he can accept his fate of what he is as an alcoholic and speak his truth. And he decides to speak his truth. And so when that counselor said to me, I think you need to go into a treatment center, I was like, well, this is my Denzel Washington moment. I knew that all the ways that I'd tried to get help in the past, I tried a lot of different things, that going into a treatment center was exactly what I needed in my life. And so I spent 3 weeks in a treatment center, which was where they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. They got me on medication. I went to classes every day, and it was something that changed my life, something that I'm very grateful for. And it's something now where with my medication, the chronic medication that I'm on, I finally have that baseline that I was always looking for. I knew that somehow I could get to that baseline in life, but I just didn't know how. And through going through what I did and going into the treatment center, getting that help, I now live a very healthy and happy life for the first time ever.
Obviously, when I'd heard about what had happened in this instant, it really hit a nerve for me. I have a talk that I do publicly called Happiness Isn't What You Think. And one of the things that prompted that keynote, the creation of that keynote, was a video that I watched 7 years ago, where this American professor was basically speaking about the idea that in the last 50 years of recorded history, average life expectancy had improved from 60 years to 80. But in the last 3 at the time, average life expectancy went down. And the main reason is because suicide and drug and opioid abuse had overtaken car accidents as the leading cause of man-made death. And I have another keynote that I do called Back to the Future. And the only reason I'm telling you is because in this keynote, Back to the Future, I'm trying to show people that by the numbers, one of the things I'm trying to tell people is that by the numbers, it's never been a better time to be alive. So you have to ask yourself this question: how can both of these truths live side by side each other? And I firmly believe that although by the numbers it's never been a better time to be alive, less extreme hunger, less extreme poverty, more access to electricity, education, and so on, these things are, by the numbers, true. The world that we live in is so much more complex, and no one prepared us for this complexity that we face today. If you just have a look at, in South Africa specifically, I'm not just saying this word lightly. We have an epidemic of suicide, especially amongst men between 45 and 54. Do you know that the suicide rate in that age group alone has tripled since the beginning of COVID? So there are so many, but this topic is like, okay, mental health is spoken about, but it's either spoken about in this very like woo-woo fashion. So when I hear your story and it comes along, I felt like this was such a great opportunity, coming back to the pillar of identity. Oftentimes when you hear this talks about mental health, and it's not from Joe. It's not from the identity of Joe. It's not from the 7-foot-tall, tattooed, big-bearded, manly man who served in Iraq. It's not from those guys. Joe, I think there's so many things to unpack here. All these years you had undiagnosed bipolar. I assume that there were many other ways you tried to fix, not bipolar because you didn't know you were having it, but to fix the extreme highs and the extreme lows. I'd love to hear about before medication, because that's a topic. I want to get there. But before medication, when you were feeling the high highs and the low lows, what were the things that you were doing to try and mitigate that?
So I was, up until recently, I was never a fan of modern medicine. I wasn't a fan of going to a therapist or a psychologist. I believe that there was other ways that you can be healed or find help. And I had a friend of mine who we both know that was mentioning to me over many years ayahuasca. I kept hearing ayahuasca for many, many years. And every time I heard that word, I became more and more curious. I had never done psychedelics before. I had no idea what they were like. But as I started to look for help and try to be fixed in some way, the idea of trying ayahuasca became very strong for me. And eventually, one day I saw this guy. He mentioned ayahuasca again, and I was like, "You need to give me this contact." And I ended up going to an ayahuasca ceremony. I think it was probably 8 or 9 years ago. At the time, I was feeling very lost. Didn't feel like I really had an identity, and I really needed some help. And everything that I had read about with ayahuasca was that it would kind of help you in many ways. You go there with an intention of what you are hoping to gain or what you want to see. And I just wanted some insight. And this ayahuasca ceremony for me was an absolute life changer. I was able to see things that most people who've never done psychedelics would, you just never, like I can't even share here what I got to see and what I actually got to understand that night. So doing ayahuasca, it led me later, a couple years later, down to doing psilocybin, doing mushroom retreats. I would go to these ceremonies with different healers, and some were shamans, some are not. But I always went there with big intentions and with the utmost respect. And I had heard of a lot of people that were being healed through psychedelics, being able to deal with old trauma, because a lot of times in these ceremonies, in these trips that you go into, you actually get to see your old trauma. You get to relive those experiences. And this is something that I wanted to do. I didn't come from a bad childhood, but maybe I thought there was something that I was missing. And I kind of kept going back to these medicine spaces, but ultimately I began to realize that it was almost like a never-ending story of like this addiction to healing that a lot of people in this industry kind of go into, that they want you to keep coming back to heal yourself. And eventually, I think once I got out of the treatment center was when I was able to really take a hard look at myself and realize, you know what? I actually don't need to fucking heal anymore. I've healed all these fucking wounds. I've moved on from this past, and now it's actually time to go live my life. Like, I don't have to keep healing and going back to this trauma, back down this dark hole, because a lot of the times when I went to go heal myself, I was alone. I'd kind of removed myself from everyone, and you just go down this dark path. And I think that dark path is now behind me, And what I now have in front of me is this amazing, beautiful path with these past traumas, which I'll tell you about. They're my stories or whatever, but it doesn't define me. My past doesn't define me. And I really feel like people these days need to just grab that trauma and fucking throw it into a bucket and just be gone with it and just focus on moving forward. Like we've all gone through some hard shit in our lives. And I do think if you are going through some serious traumas in your life, I do strongly believe that ayahuasca and mushrooms can truly help you out and truly help you see some amazing things that you'll never see in your life. But there's a way of doing it once or twice and go on with the rest of your life. And what they call in that space is integration, is going out in life and just going out there. Will I do it again? I have no idea. But for now, for the next however long, I have zero interest. But it is something that I would encourage to people, but just not get addicted to the healing. That is the main thing.
I found this topic fascinating because some of the things that I really took out from your interviews, the podcasts, the articles, was this idea of addiction to healing. Let me paraphrase the way it really landed for me, is that I'm not even here to encourage you or discourage you from either ayahuasca, mushrooms, whatever. I've done it. But I actually think all of these things are tools. The irony to me is what landed up for you, working for you in the end, was that hardcore medication. You are diagnosed with bipolar, and the thing that actually landed for you was the other tool, being medication.
The thing I was avoiding the most.
The thing so what we tend to do is get hooked on the tool as if it's the solution, but it's just the tool. So when you said addiction, like we get addicted to healing, that was what really landed for me, was that we pin our hopes on the coattails of the tool, which is twofold for me. Then it becomes about just smashing the tool left, right, and center. And what really landed for me on the other side is the idea of integration. It doesn't matter actually what it is that you use, whether you use mushrooms, ayahuasca, hardcore medication, even that is just a tool. And there's a point in time where you have to exit from using the tools and you have to go and actually do the work. So half of the issue when we go from retreat to retreat is that we're relying on the retreat to heal us, as opposed to the retreat to get insight and then use that time to integrate, to do the work. So it's almost, in other words, correct me if I'm wrong, we're using the tool and we're avoiding to do the work. And then we can't understand why we're not getting better as human beings. And this is why the advice is so conflicting. One person's going like, dude, you got to do mushrooms. It'll heal you. And the other person's like, no, you got to go get medication. And the irony for me is that it's technically all true or not true, but they're actually just tools. Comments, thoughts?
What came up for me is that there's a lot of things in my life that I try to avoid, and I find that when there's something you're avoiding or something that you find is uncomfortable, that's where the growth is. That's where the opportunity is. And for many years, I tried to avoid medicine, and that was the thing that I really needed in my life, because I knew that what was going wrong with me, or what made me unique, what makes me unique, is my neurological, was that whatever was going on up here needed to be fixed. And that was through modern medicine. That was ultimately what I needed. And I think I would have struggled to find the right medication just by going to a normal psychologist or psychiatrist. Like for me, I really needed to go into a treatment center, spend a lot of time there, and get diagnosed by the right people. But I had a conversation with someone who I do deeply care about this person. He called to just he sent me a voice note just to kind of check in. And he is more on the side of plant medicine healing versus Western medicine. And, he shared a lot of gratitude about seeing my posts and my videos online. And then he said, hey, bro, whenever you get ready to get off that medication, give me a call. I've got stuff that'll sort you out. There's many things that'll help you to get off that medication. And I knew that comment was coming from him. And I just sent him a voice note back, and I just said, look, bro, this is exactly what I need. I don't need to get off this medication. This medication has saved my life. It has given me peace. I've never been so happy in my life. And there's no fucking way that I would ever get off my medication. Like, I've got one of those old school pill boxes that I have to organize every Sunday night. I sit on the stoop. I take out my big box of meds. I put them in the daily organizer. I put in my other stuff that goes in there. And that keeps me in check every single day of my life. And if I go on a trip and I forget that pill box, I've done it once or twice. It gives me terrible anxiety, but I would not miss a day on my medication because it makes me who I am.
But I think here's the real anchor for me. When I read all the articles about your story, when I spoke to you, I've interviewed you twice one-on-one to learn more about tonight. When I watched the podcast that you were on recently, what is the name of that podcast? I met the gentleman.
He's here. His name's Jacques. Where are you, Jacques? I think he's upstairs somewhere. Endure Edge Podcast.
Yeah, it was so good.
Oh, there he is back there. Oh, there he is.
I have a bias here, which is that I've got this talk that I do about happiness isn't what you think. And a big part of a point I'm always trying to get across is that in life, there's no silver bullet to your happiness. So even with the medication, Joe, what I learned about your journey, and I'd love for you to comment on it, is that even with the medication, there were a whole bunch of other things that you actually had to do to achieve a higher level of happiness and contentment. And these are the things I think we're not speaking about. So the lesson I took from you is you could go down the plant medicine path. Maybe modern medicine is for you. But even if you do those things, that's not where it ends. So I want to list these things that I really took from you because it really inspired me. And I'd love for us to expand on it as we close and take some questions. One, you had an episode, again, learning in December that drinking, you can take all this medication, but if you keep drinking, it's going to continue to fuck you up. So a hard lesson you had to get through is alcohol's not for me, which is such a strong lesson for me, right? You can't just take the medication and then be like, I'm sharp. Taking the medication, but then drinking, these two didn't mix well. But it went further because beyond the idea of not drinking, you learned eventually, if I don't get out into nature more regularly, if I don't change other habits and behaviors of my life, and this is the takeaways that I'm hoping we could impart on anybody who hears the story, is like, you've got this whole men's group, which I'm going to let you explain, where you get out into nature every Friday. That opens up not just the access to getting out in nature and taking on those benefits, but actually the act of conversing and processing emotions and chatting amongst men. Because as you pointed out so articulately in that podcast, it's not that men don't have a place to chat. They go to the bar all the time and chat to each other. It's just that environment is fucked. And so you had to learn not only just to cut alcohol, but then to get out in nature and to change the environment, which then seemed to change the way you and other men processed information. And then you even went one step further that you realized, like, well, if I don't start putting some time into my health from an eating perspective, not just the videos that you do, but my training. And so my point is that not only did you have to go, let's say you came here tonight and you said, well, the plant medication really helped me. You would still have to do those other things too. So I want to veer away from solely the plant medication versus the modern medicine. I think a lesson I took from there is you have to go figure out what it is to work for you. And we shit on these things like modern medication sometimes, but actually it turned out to save your life. But then it wasn't just those things. We wouldn't be on the stage now if the story was, you want to be happy, take pills. That's not a storyline. That's not a lesson. The storyline is I did these things to get back to a baseline, but then to actually really integrate and move away from addiction to healing. I got out into nature. I started talking to men in a very different environment. I cut alcohol. I started focusing on my training. And I started making these videos. I started processing my emotions more regularly. I started speaking up. I would love to use you to speak to that because that for me was the lesson that I would love for you to share with this audience.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like there's no quick fix. There's no easy pill that you can take. And I think I was in the treatment center in May last year. So I've had a very long integration phase since then. Like when I got out, I felt everything was great. Everything was sharp, that I had this medication and then everything was going to be fine. But then life kind of hit you in the face. And I had to start reaching into that toolbox that you mentioned, Mark, of really finding what other things worked for me. And just before I tried to commit suicide, the kind of 2 weeks leading up to that moment, there was one thing that I knew that I was lacking in my life, and that was healthy connections. I had friends that met at the bar every Friday, and I was like, I really would love to see these guys, but I cannot be at the fucking pub. Like, I cannot go there. And all I really wanted to do was ask my friends, do you want to go for a walk? Like, do you want to go for a walk at the park? But I was too ashamed and too afraid to even ask those guys if they could go for a walk. So I got out of the treatment center, and one of the things that I needed to kind of help myself heal, and one of the things that I needed to be true to, was all the people that I speak to on Instagram. I was sharing a lot of different stuff that was going on in my life, but I was not sharing the truth of what I had went through. And so one day I mustered up the courage to actually do a testimonial video about my suicide attempt and what I had gone through. And I felt that it was very important for me to share my complete truth with my audience so that they get the full story of who I am, but also that maybe there was someone out there who would resonate with this message. It would land with them, and they would think, you know what? Actually, I'm not committing suicide today. Maybe through sharing my story, it would give them some strength and some hope and some courage. And I know for a fact that that's what it did. I've still, to this day, received many messages from people all over the world, actually, of, hey, thank you for sharing your message of what you do. It's really helped me. I had a father who committed suicide, or I had another partner, and it's my way of giving back to society is by sharing my truth and sharing my stories. And so, yeah, just going back to one of the other things about getting back into nature was, after I did my testimonial video, I needed to get out and start walking again, and I wanted to make connections. So one day I put out a video on Instagram of, so here in South Africa, I'm starting a men's walk, and I'm inviting any man who wants to come and join me on a Friday morning at Delta Park, at the Delta Park Blue Bridge, to come down and join me. Well, what do you think happened that first walk? It was my roommates, me, and a buddy. Of course, that's how everything starts. Next week, I think it was my roommate, his crazy-ass dog, and this other guy. And eventually, that group started to grow, and now we have a WhatsApp community with over 400 men who have said, you know what, I like what you're doing. I want to be a part of it. I need some help. I'm willing to be a part of a community. So now we have walks in Joburg, Cape Town, Pretoria. And the amazing thing that we also have in that community is a support group. So there's a WhatsApp support group for guys who need help or guys who are willing to offer help. And one of the things that I love most about the group is that, like, there's been many mornings I've woken up and I see a message from the support group, and it's a message from so-and-so at 11 o'clock at night or 1 in the morning. Hey guys, is anyone up? I really need someone to talk to. The next message, someone says, hey, I'm up. I'll give you a call now. So I've seen that by me being able to put myself out there to try to grab these other guys to come together and join me on walks or be a part of a community in some way has truly helped them, you know. I think on average we kind of have about 15 or 20 guys on a Friday morning. It's very difficult for guys who work in corporate to join our walk. It's Friday morning at 6 a.m. We are going to be starting what's called a walk and plunge. So there's a company, actually the guy is here tonight. His name's Greg from Rise. They do ice baths. So we're going to be starting a walk and plunge. So guys come on a walk, then we do a cold plunge afterwards. So I've been really seeing more need for recharge. So I don't know if I said it earlier, but recharge is the name of this community.
If you're a man, or you purport to be a man, you are welcome to scan that QR code. And I just thought I'd pass along I'd pay it forward and share the link for you guys. Joe, you can leave it here for like 2 minutes, Bucks. One of the lessons I was reminded of when you and I were speaking the other day, we tend to look at the extremes of life and only act then. So a lot of people when I invited a few people to this talk, they were like, but I don't want to kill myself. And I was like, no, I think you're missing the boat as to why you should come and listen. Because the measure of addiction or the measure of struggle shouldn't be only if you are sitting under a bridge with a needle in your arm. Oftentimes, a struggle is more related to, for example, I had to learn this lesson with alcohol myself. I have the odd drink on occasion, but to be honest with you, I went from drinking myself flat to realizing I don't actually have an addiction to alcohol, but I'm just shittier at a bunch of things because of how much I drink in general. So yeah, I can go on breaks, I can not drink for 2 months or 3 months and then drink again, but my life is shittier overall. Do I have an addiction to alcohol? I didn't think so. But when I started to understand that I didn't need to be in a rehab center to be focusing on becoming a better version of myself, and I could still get a benefit from going on these walks, that you don't have to be thinking about killing yourself to go on these. You don't have to wait till there's 2 tanks of propane to start making positive changes. One of the funny things I always have with my talk, the happiness talk, is I invite people and they're like, I'm already happy. And I always say to them, but can't you be a happier version of yourself? Like, what's funny? I just watched Alcaraz over the weekend win the Australian Open. He's the youngest ever tennis player to complete the career Grand Slam. And he's got a coach. Why? He's kind of the best. What would he need a coach for? You know how fucked up that mentality is. He's like, no, I'm good, so I don't need work. I'm good, so I don't have to come on the walk. I'm good, so I'm okay with only going to the pub. I promise you, men, I want to just tell you, and I want to encourage you, this statistic of 45 to 54, by the way, not the only age group that's increased dramatically with suicide. Not speaking up, not making little changes, not finding a better environment to connect and to process your emotions is not serving you. By the numbers, listen to me, especially you older fuckers. Listen to me. You're not serving you. This idea that I'm strong, and so a measure of strength is how much I keep my shit together. It's not fucking serving you. It's just not. But it also doesn't mean that we have to go take every medicine retreat on the planet and you have to go from like that to holding hands, singing Kumbaya around the fire. I really want to encourage you, if nothing else from Joe's story tonight, just make one tiny change. I think the idea of joining your walks is such a good idea. You have no clue how much better you'll feel just for that hour that morning being with other men just like you. And it's not like a pity party where you all get there and you talk about how broken everything is.
We definitely don't do that. It's like anyone can come, and it's I think just what a lot of people need. What I needed at a point in my life was I needed to get outside and just to move. I was sitting in with that pity and shame and guilt, and all I needed to do sometimes was just get out and walk. And if you can't join my walks on a Friday, please join the community if you can. But get out and take a walk. If you're ever sitting in a place and you just feel like you're absolutely lost and you have no way forward, I promise you, go out and take a walk. It'll change you. It helps me every time I go and do it. And take a walk and join us at Recharge.
Jason asks, what dreams can you pursue now that you have control over your mental health? What does it open for you?
I guess anything is possible. That's a good question. I've been doing many things. I've had a business in mind for many years now. And last year, that business really took a knock. I felt like last year I kind of lost confidence in myself, in my business, and I feel like I kind of let a lot of people down who were in my community. Those who used to come and ride with me, I felt like I let a lot of those people down. And I've had to take a hard look at my business of like, what is the future of my business? Because that business is something that I'm truly passionate about, something that I absolutely love doing. But at the moment, maybe it's not serving me. Maybe at this moment in time, it needs a pause, it needs a break. And what I need in my life right now is this recharge, is helping men out who need help. This has been a big calling for me. And so at the moment, I don't know where this journey is going to go. Like I was saying the other day, that a few weeks ago, I couldn't see this path in front of me. And I recently started laying these bricks just in front of this path. So I know what the direction is going, and I'm not making any big decisions at the moment. I base all my decisions on my heart and by feel. And at the moment, I'm not making any irrational decisions, and I'm just taking one day at a time to move forward and to see where are things going to go. Where will things take me tomorrow? And then I'll know what's the right way forward for the decisions and dreams that I need to have.
Because it speaks to a hard truth that people sometimes struggle. You said on one end you've never been happier, but you basically still have to come to terms with, even with you taking the modern medicine, going for walks, training, cutting out alcohol, you're going to have really shitty days. Your baseline has evened out a little bit. So these days, am I right in saying you don't have such high highs and such low lows, but you still have lots of highs and lows?
Yeah,
and they're going to be there forever.
Yeah, I have shitty days, but I find when those shitty days, I'm still cool. Like I'm fine. It doesn't get me completely down. I don't need to go lock myself in a corner anymore. It's like, yeah, things are shit, but I'm good. I'm sharp.
Linz wants to know, or she says, I would love your take on how you think women can best support men without disrupting the deeply personal process of healing as they navigate and confront their triggers, emotions, and wounds.
So I have an amazing woman who supports me in so many ways. And the one thing that I find is amazing with a partner is knowing from a woman's perspective that you cannot change that person. That person is not your responsibility to fix and solve their problems. You can be there to kind of help them along the way, but until that person is ready to make a change, there's ultimately sometimes nothing that you can do about it. You can be there to support him and to support that man in many ways, to be there to kind of hold him, to always be available to him, but ultimately knowing that that man is the one who's going to have to make the decision. I was never ready to go into a treatment center. My ex-wife had given me multiple chances, had tried so many ways, but I was never ready. And I don't know that I had the right support for me, but I do now. And I know that my partner, she can't be there she can hold my hand, but I've got to be the one to walk through that door. It's got to be me that walks out with my head held high. I need to be the one to go out and make that work.
Kaylee wants to know, if you could offer someone one piece of advice while they are going through their own mental health struggles, what would it be?
I always just say, keep going. I get a lot of messages from guys who are really in a lot of pain. And I've had messages from guys who are saying, I really just want to take my life. And what I'd say to them is just keep fucking going. I thought that I hit rock bottom many times. And then you find out that at rock bottom, there's a basement under there. And then under that one, there's another basement. But I really find that when you're in this shit place, that there's a reason you're there, and there's an opportunity for you to rebuild yourself up and become stronger than who you were. I can say that because that's what happened to me. I was in a very dark place, and I was able to rebuild myself So if you find yourself in a dark hole and you don't know what you're going to do, please just keep going and keep fighting, because I promise you, you're in this position for a reason, and it's worth it to just keep fighting.
It's funny how life disguises growth as pain. And you need it, otherwise you don't get it right. Anonymous wants to know, do you think you can get better without help? I don't know what help, but that's the question.
Do you think you can get better without help? No. Because I think that you need... One thing that I wasn't able to do for many years was actually ask for help. Because to feel like you can carry the weight of all those groceries in one load, you're eventually going to drop one of those grocery bags. And there's always someone out there who's willing to lend a hand to you, and you just need to be willing to ask for help. I didn't ask for help for many years, and I think the biggest thing that people need is help, whether it be phoning a friend, going out for a walk, phoning a therapist. Like, I don't think you can do it without help. I really don't.
Another anonymous wants to know, what do you do when you know someone you love is struggling, but they don't want to admit it or ask or accept help?
That's a hard one to ask. That's a hard one to answer. I would say phone a friend. There's always other ways to get to someone. And I know what that's like to be in a situation where, you can't get that person help. There's always a way, whether it be connecting with another friend, find a way. It's a pity when it does come to that.
Kaz, please share the name of the Instagram account, the podcast, and the medical center. As you say, someone struggling with bipolar and in denial of it has to get to that place of seeking help on their own. Yet until they do, they can also be so destructive, especially to those closest. How does one stay around and support? Okay, let's just do this in two parts. Please, can you share the name of the Instagram account?
So tall, like I'm very tall, so tall right now. That's the name of my Instagram page. The men's community is called Recharge ZA. The name of the podcast that I was on that you can go to on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple is Endurer Edge Podcast. Jacques, he's one of the three. There's fucking three tall guys here tonight. There's myself, Jacques, and I think I met a guy named Wayne. Was it Wayne? Yeah, so one of the three tall people, ask if you're the guy from the podcast. And then the name of the retreat, the name of the
medical center.
The medical center I went to was called Life Riverfield out in Four Ways. Amazing, amazing place. And if you have to go there, when you go get food, you can also select double portions. So I highly recommend.
Okay, Kaz asked the second part. How does one stay around and support while also trying to protect yourself and without waiting for them to get where you got to? Well, they're trying to, like, how do you stay around? So if you're in the position where the person that you're with perhaps is going through what you went through, how do you stay around, and how do you be supportive of Joe in that instant? But how do you also protect yourself without waiting for them to get to the basement?
Yeah. I think the best thing that you can do. So there's like a group called Al-Anon, Adult Children of Alcoholics. There's other support groups that you can go to for yourself. To is it Al-Anon? Al-Anon. That's right. So there's other support groups for people who are in that situation that they can go to. And then I think for people who need support, if you're trying to support that partner, honestly, you got to set boundaries. You have to set boundaries for yourself, because that person needs to go get the help themselves. And if they're not making that effort to go get the help they need, and you feel sort of unsafe, you have to make some hard decisions because like I wasn't in a place in my marriage where I wanted to make a change. The juice wasn't worth a squeeze to me. And so that person had to let me go, and she made the right decision there. And I think you kind of get to a point in a relationship where you see there's nothing more I can do for this person. I need to go make a choice.
Joe, in the beginning of this evening, as we close off, I try to speak to these 5 pillars, which I found to be so fascinating. And I want to come back to them because I just want to share with you what I learned from you. We inherit these identities. And for a long time, you didn't necessarily get the help or go and do the things that you wanted to do out of shame. I just want to go for a walk, but what would people think of me? And it's so interesting when you look back and you realize how daft it can be, but how real that is. And that these identities are given to us. We inherit them, but we can question these identities, or at least parts of them. It's kind of what you've done. Here's this tall, lanky American who's gone completely another way, taking modern medication because for you, that's what's working, but doing so much of the other work too. I think to understand how fluid identity really is. And I don't mean that in a woo-woo sense. You just don't have to accept everything that you inherited or that was given to you. 2, I'm biased, but I'm a South African that loves South Africa. And I just love that there's an American in our country that's trying to get other people to our country, that agrees that we have many problems, but that we also don't fully always appreciate the many good things about South Africa. And so I want to say thank you. Thank you for being the person that is willing to share the perspective and sometimes just remind South Africans it's not all doom and gloom. There are many amazing things. In the last year of getting to know you a bit, I've learned so much again around mental health. And it's packaged differently when you speak about it, because there is a lived experience of you being in that car, making that decision, and then for whatever reason, life gave you a second gap, and you're using it. And I'm so grateful to you for giving other people permission to do the same. I really took so much from you about medication aside, you have to put in the work. There's all these other things that you have to do. And I want to encourage every single one of you here. The fact that you're here on a Wednesday night, you're willing to do the work. And it's attached to every part of life. You can't get away from it. You really landed this idea of addicted to healing. For me, the idea was simply that you can't go from tool to tool without taking time to integrate and to do the work. So Joe, from me to you, I want to say thank you for your time. But people came to hear from you, so I'd love for you to give the audience a parting thought. The stage is yours for a minute or two, and then I'm going to say goodnight to everybody.
I've first of all, never thought that I would be sitting on a stage talking about an experience of of a suicide attempt, and having all these people come support me, and the people online who support me in so many ways from across the world, like just by putting myself out there in so many ways, it's mind-blowing to see how Instagram and social media work. I put out a post the other day about stop caring about what other people think of you. And I think that's a message that really hit me hard, that I'll share one more story that when I was in the treatment centers, my previous partner, she thought that my hair was quite shit. So you can see up here that I've got like a receding hairline. So I shaved my head for like 20 years. And I got to a point where someone said to me, you should grow your hair out. I was like, no, I look like a doos. Like, I'm not going to do that. And so eventually I just said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to grow my hair out. And when I was in the treatment center around May, I think it was wintertime. It was cold. I had a beanie on. My hair was getting long, and it was getting to a point where I could like slick it back. And I was like, man, you know what? I could probably walk out into that classroom of people I don't know, people who I will never see again in my whole life. And I guarantee I can walk out there and I don't need a beanie. I can take my hat off for the first time ever. And I remember standing in front of this mirror in my bedroom that I had, and I took off the beanie and I was looking at myself. I was like, bro, you can fucking do this. You can fucking do this. You're going to do this. Yes, you're going to do this. All right, let's go. So I left the break and I went back into the classroom and I sat down for the first time ever in 20 years with no hat on. And I just owned who I am in that moment. And at that moment, I stopped caring about what other people think about me. And I realized that I was put on this earth to be 100% me. You were put on this earth to be 100% who you are and to not let anyone take any of that away from you. If you do, you're giving them that power. And I felt in that day that I finally kind of regained my power. And so regain your power and be 100% you. That's all for me tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Fleming.